Hello everyone. This video is a little different compared to my others. It is of Joy Wisdom, who developed Alunus. Joy's work goes far deeper than just past lives. However, for this channel I have focused on her past life work and the connection with past lives and healing Gaia. In the description are links to Joy Wisdom's website with more information about Alunus and her books. Also, there is a link to another video where Joy describes in more detail her courses and her books. The video is only available via this link. I want to keep this channel as interesting for my subscribers as possible. Please let me know if you are interested to see or hear interviews with other people and any stories of children with spontaneous past lives. This channel is for you to enjoy, so please do give me that valued feedback. In the meantime, here is part of my interview with Joy Wisdom.
Can you introduce yourself so everybody who's just come in fresh to this will know a bit about you?
Okay. Hello, I'm Joy Wisdom and I'm the founder of Alunus and Light Healing Program. It also includes the Dissolve and Resolve Emotions practitioner training and one-to-ones that can help a new approach to health and well-being, but also spiritual development. So there is a range of products that we can offer, training, one-to-ones, but also enlightenment, finding out who we are internally.
You went to various different training, went to counselling, and there was always something missing. If you can say about those missing keys to us, please.
Indeed, those missing keys were, I knew I was getting to certain levels, but something about me knew that there were even bigger levels that I wasn't tapping into. And it was a guy with a back issue. He arrived one day, he worked next door, and he knocked on the door and said, I've got terrible back pain. He could hardly stand up. Can you do something to help me? So by that time I was working with cranial sacral therapy. I'd specialised in women and children's health, so I was working with babies from trauma, birth trauma, and mothers with postnatal depression and all of those sort of things. Much bigger than my training in cranial work. But I started to work with him with craniosacral techniques, and his back was absolutely solid. It was like a vice. And everything I tried wasn't touching the sides. And so something within me wanted me to look at past injuries, past life injuries. Once I started to go on that route, looking at that, the whole back unwound itself from this tight vice-like, nothing moving at all, to unwinding, relaxing, and my hands were on his back, and they were just falling, his back was just falling into my hands as it elongated and opened. And he responded to those past life injuries. We found that he'd actually broken his back because he'd fallen in another life. But he'd also had other issues with back in other lives too. And when we finished all this unwinding, I just let the back was just doing its own thing. And I just followed that through. And when we finished, he said to me, well, that was the weirdest experience I have ever had, but I feel brilliant. I feel so much better. He sat up straight, no pain, and walked out of the therapy room tall, no pain, relaxed. And I thought, this is the missing piece. This is the missing piece I have to investigate. And so I did that with clients and started to build up a portfolio of what I found, what I did with that, how I did it, because it was different for everybody, and started to put techniques together to be able to work, of finding that it was actually compounded. It wasn't just one life. There were many layers of this underneath. And so I found ways of dealing with all of those layers in one session, rather than one life at a time, but also all the emotions and the impacts in the mind, the trauma, the stress that the body still held, the shock it still held, and it was buried in the tissue of the bone, the muscles. And the more we removed these layers of emotion, the less pain people had. They could feel it ebbing away. And we looked at different themes. I had people who came with relationship issues and very much involved in past life, and the circle and cycle of generations of learning through cultures, lineages, but also groups of people, families, learning how to love, how to not shut each other out, learning tolerance, learning about injustice, learning what not to do. There was karma in there, but there was also influences of dominance through the lineage that then created the dominance in the people that followed, and hence eventually got round to writing the Mirror Image book to explain that. But certainly those days of development and questing, it went from pain, aches, pains, trauma, stress, shock. For me, we don't even touch it's the tip of the iceberg with the shock, of how we approach shock and how we deal with people with shock, because even 200 lives later, they're still carrying it. And it still creates these levels of limitation to what the physical body can do for us, because it's hitting this brick wall again with shock. And in cranial sacral training, we were told that this shock comes through the body, and as it comes through the body, if there are blockages and limitation, then it gets stuck somewhere in the body. I understand from emotions and zoning, as we're taught in reflexology and shiatsu and other such modalities, that we go work in straight lines, but we also have horizontal lines, diagonal lines. And what happens is that this shock, as it ripples through the body, it will hit somewhere where we've had previous shock. And so what happens is it gets stuck. Body doesn't know what to do with it, so it will put tissue around it, so it becomes a permanent atom within us. And that's not going to go anywhere until we deal with that shock. And we can have shock stored all over the place. Some months later, even years later, we'll say, oh, I get this awful pain around the hip. Been to the doctor, they've done scans, they've done x-rays, and can't find anything wrong. But I still feel this pain. I still feel, it feels very uncomfortable. And it's nothing to do with the physical body. It's the emotion and the shock and everything else that's accumulated there. Because we do store everywhere in our body. And one of the things of those keys that I found was that very much we will have stores of emotion in the weakest part of our physical. Some people, we store it in the back. Some people, it's in the pelvis. Other people, it's in the gut, in the head, in the neck. And we store in these areas, and the body is looking for places to store, do something with what we've given it. And it goes in the most bizarre places. It can be in your big toe. It can be in your little finger. And you think, well, that's very strange. But maybe that was the only place that was open that the body could store. So lots and lots of keys came to the fore. And through the development of my questing, we were able to deal with things in a very, very different way. So people could come with emotional issues, spiritual issues being held back, karma, curses, vows, promises, all of those things. We could have all of those things in the mix for a person, for a family, for a lineage, for a culture. And they were all tainted by it and going on this treadmill. And certainly with relationships, we can go around the houses for life after life after life, and we keep coming back to be able to resolve those issues for each of us. And we'll play different roles in that. Sometimes you'll be the lover, sometimes you'll be the mother, or the grandmother, or the sibling, and we play out these different roles, learning and progressing, and hopefully bringing evolution into your family, being able to move on from the areas that have been stuck from trauma and fear, which is at the baseline of almost everything with lack of love, lack of nurturing. We keep coming to that all the time.
Now, I know you've also done a lot of research in all that you've done. Are there any people within the NHS or doctors that have seriously looked at your work and said, you know, maybe they don't say out to people in general, but have said, you know, I can see there's some evidence here, we're going to look into this, or I think, or suggest you, you know, on the side or anything like that?
Sadly, no. We're still down the route of dealing with cognitive and pharmaceutical, whereas a lot of our past life influences have a lot to do with our mental issues. And certainly there was just an announcement on the TV this week about them pouring millions and millions of pounds in to look at genetics and taking samples from people to see if there's a genetic link with depression. From my point of view, the genetic link is from the womb and utero, and how the mother is feeling at that particular time. Is she feeling supported or not through her pregnancy? And the bombardment of hormonal chemicals and peptides that the baby will be formed from. So again, they're looking for a pill. And from my point of view, it's the furthest away from what we should be looking at, which is looking at the core of that, which is formation. And where we can really, really help. If we support our mothers, they can have a better pregnancy, which will produce a child that will feel more secure and less depression, ADHD, even autism, that is going to be formed from brain pathways that are hormonally linked, biologically linked, that will create a dysfunctional living, abnormal living, which will seem normal for the person because they're in it and they don't know anything else.
I also know you do a lot of work with earth energies and Gaia. Can you say about that work as well, please?
Yes, I've been working with Gaia since mid-1990s. I wouldn't say I was knowing what I was doing at that point, but I had the urge and direction from spirit to go to different places, sacred sites, stone circles and all of that sort of thing. And when I stood in certain places, I could feel the connection and the energy coming through the feet, but I could also feel it coming through me. So sometimes it was for me to fill up different parts of Gaia. Sometimes it was a connection with the two that would create a different level of converted energy, more acute, more refined, or whatever that was. And we are used as tubes or anchoring rods for Gaia and for spirit to be able to make those changes with Gaia. As I developed and I met different people, and sometimes I would go with other people to sacred sites, and we would all have a part to play in that. We wouldn't know what those parts were because they would be automatic through us. And then I developed an interest on finding out how Gaia ticks and ley lines and chakras and all of that sort of thing. And I realised that just like us, Gaia has a lot of dense energy in different parts around the world, and sometimes we could work on that remotely. Other times you had to get in the car and go there. And when you got there, you would find, ooh, yeah, it's a very different picture. And we would help to fine-tune that energy. And I went on 6 journeys to Egypt, and they would have been up to 2 weeks each time we went. And I would go with other people in groups. I wasn't running it, but I was there to support people. And again, as people found out some of the things that I did in the early 2000s, I would have a queue of people wanting, well, can you help me? Can you help me to look at my past life influences and all of that sort of thing? Also, being at these sacred and spiritual places, things would come up for people. They would have memories of past lives, of being in Egypt or who they were. We would recognise one another and so on and so forth. So there were lots of pluses to those coming together, but there could also be some heartache of perhaps waste of life, not learning enough, all of those things. So invariably everybody was going off and enjoying the sunshine and by the pool after we'd done our morning's work or afternoon work. And then I was working on one-to-ones with the people that had been in the group, helping them to open their heart. And I realised as we were going through one of these particular visits that I was moving towards a time frame of where we were going to have a focal point of what we were there to do, and we'd been building towards that. But I was also building to open people's hearts so we could achieve it. So there was Spirit's hidden agenda. It wasn't the organisers' agenda, and so it just grew from that, really. And then I realised that I didn't need to go anymore to Egypt. My part or my role in that was complete. Although there were quite amazing journeys, and we talk about winning the lottery. It's like winning the lottery when you go on these things, because you receive so much and learn so much about yourself that is revealed to you. It is like winning the lottery, and no money in the world will bring you the joy of, as happened to me on one of these journeys, finding 6 children that I had been mother to. And a husband that had also been a son, and that reuniting, it was the most amazing time, and not only being mother to them once but several times, and that bonding and love that we have for each other, and still in contact with some of those people. And when you give them a hug, it just feels like your daughter or son from now, because it was so potent for you in those lives. And then I went on to do a lot of work around the world, very often being sent on holiday somewhere, but my agenda would be earthwork, and I would be going to different places, helping to rebalance chakra points, clearing ley lines, faults in the earth, and all of that sort of thing. And then in 2010 I was given an agenda for Gaia, and started taking my own groups, and that happened then in 2010, 11, 12 in the UK, and then from then on in 13 we went to Africa and the USA. From there we went to Europe. So you don't know where you're going to be called to go. Very much on my holidays. Sometimes, I've been to the Baltic because it was the easiest way to get there without visas, so on and so forth. So you go on a cruise, and people think, oh, wonderful, you're going on a cruise. Yeah, you haven't got the phone, but you're working all day, every day. And you're working with the oceans, the portals under the oceans, you're working with the vortexes, working with dolphins. Dolphins would swim by the side of the ship and telling me that it's okay, it's complete, and they will be there for 2 seconds and they're gone. But that's their message and signal to me. So very enjoyable, wonderful work. Energy, weather changes when you make these changes for Gaia. Some of them are from man and the denseness that man's created that you're clearing off. And so there can be huge storms. You're leaving, but there will be a huge storm and change very much the weather. Temperature will drop considerably, certainly when we're doing some of this deep clearing on people as well as for Gaia. It will become very icy, Arctic, in fact. Winds will pick up and you feel as though there's a whirlwind around you while these things change. And then it will all just settle as the earth settles. My new book that I've been on now for 3 years trying to get this finished is all about these journeys and how the earth ticks, what we've done to her, the opportunities that we've been having moving from the Piscean to the Aquarian age, and some of the atrocities that has been part of my work to try and lift that from Gaia, which then lifts it from consciousness, because if it's buried in Gaia, we are receiving some of that and it dilutes our energy. So by being able to remove these layers, for instance in Scotland at Culloden, there was layer upon layer upon layer upon layer that just went on and on and on. Sometimes there would be souls stuck in that and moving these souls on rather than because they're in shock, they couldn't go to the light. So it's releasing these souls. And I was on a big agenda in 2009 through to 2012 to help to lift these souls from Gaia, because she couldn't ascend with this weight, this extra weight that we shouldn't have. And me and lots of other people, we didn't know one another, but we would work at night helping for these souls to move on. And the shamans call it the walk of the dead. And in past times we've helped to move on these souls, but we've lost a lot of that knowledge. And I was surprised to find out that I had some of that knowledge, so which was why I was called upon to help with that. And it really helped enormously to lighten the load for Gaia, lighten the load for us, expand consciousness. So it's a win-win situation. And I realized back in 2010 that we were also activating wonderful information that we'd brought from Atlantis to help us at this time of consciousness, of acceleration. And so we're also tapping into that. We're also helping Gaia to receive that, for us to receive some of that knowledge into consciousness and so on. So it's not all the negative side, it's the linking up, switching on, or from the dormancy, because Gaia's had a lot of dormancy, and it's getting that switched on so that we can all benefit from that.
Joy, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you, it's been my pleasure. Thank you.